This is the third video in my series of investigating products from Temu that aren't exactly what you imagined. Under the last video, a lot of people suggested looking at their fake fur keyrings, so that's exactly what I did. I ordered 7 of these, and the results were equally surprising and disgusting. I also wanted to solve the mystery of the Temu starfish, which some of you might remember from a viral TikTok last year. A lady ordered some starfish curtain ties, and the package came stinking of fish. She assumed it was a decorative piece, but it turned out to be a real dead starfish. This one is still easy to find on Temu, and there are many listings with virtually identical product images. I ordered 3 of these, 2 in white and 1 in blue. One thing I realized doing all of these Temu tests is that it's impossible to tell what a product is like just based on the pictures. It's only after getting them when you can see where the real differences are. After taking the first starfish out, I could tell right away that this looks like resin. The obvious clue is that the back is perfectly smooth and has this small ridge that is typical of something which was poured into a mold. It also feels heavy and makes a clunky noise when tapped against the table. So it's safe to say that this one is fake and will probably make a nice curtain ring. The second one is this blue starfish. In both my croissant and tooth video, I mentioned that a giveaway for a real object compared to a replica is that there's too much detail on the side that people are going to see. It doesn't make economic sense to add color or shading to the parts that one can see. However, to my surprise, this starfish does have some clear detailing in the back. But upon close inspection, the texture looks a bit sloppy and artificial. This was most likely made using a 3-dimensional mold that captured the detail on both sides of a starfish. I also spotted a tiny air bubble here, which is a clear giveaway that this was created with liquid resin. The weight of the starfish also feels the same as the first one, which makes it too dense and heavy to be a real animal. Now for the last starfish, and this one is a realistic creamy color. Almost too realistic, I would say, and when flipping this around, you can immediately see a ton of detail. This is very different compared to the rough texture on the back of the blue starfish. It also feels much lighter and doesn't make a clunky noise when you tap it on the table. I've never looked at a starfish this close before and just realized now that it's made of such a beautifully intricate pattern. I think we can already say for sure that this one is a real starfish. The final proof is this tiny gap on the back, which wouldn't be possible if the item was cast from resin. This seems to indicate the arm is hollow. I'm going to confirm this by cracking it open. Just as suspected, the inside is empty and this is clearly a dried starfish. You can also see how easily the arm broke off compared to an arm from the resin one. I'm pretty sure this is the starfish that the lady on Temu received. To be fair, I don't think this product is that scandalous because a dried starfish is really not comparable to an actual tooth from a dead animal. The main issue would be how a real starfish would affect the function of the item. This did smell a bit fishy and I'm not sure I'd want it on my curtains. If you have radiators near the window, then that's only going to amplify the smell. As I continued breaking off pieces of the starfish, I noticed a black substance coming out from inside. This is not blood because starfish don't have any. Their vascular system actually uses seawater to move nutrients around the body. I'm guessing this is just leftover debris or biological material, but it does smell pretty bad. So when I was browsing these curtain ties, one of the listings sent me to a product for only the starfish. I imagine people buy these for DIYs the same way you might buy seashells or dried flowers. I ordered 2 of them, and you can see they're exactly the same as the curtain starfish. These didn't cost very much, and I can easily see a company deciding to glue them onto rope instead of manufacturing resin ones. Even though resin as a material is cheap, the production process involves more time and manpower, so that almost certainly increases the costs. This one also has that weird black stuff inside, which is slightly gross, but not a huge deal if you don't break it. So in conclusion, 2 of the 3 starfish curtain rings were fake and 1 was real. Though as mentioned earlier, this particular example isn't really something I can get mad about. A dried starfish falls under seashells, sea urchins, or other natural specimens that are frequently used for decorative purposes. Especially in China, it's very common to see this type of thing for crafting. I've attached a clip here from a mall I went to last year in Beijing, and it shows a DIY area for kids. You can clearly see a bunch of little dried starfish in one of the boxes. The sea urchin shells are beautiful, and you're allowed to use anything you like to create sculptures. The main issue here might be a bit of deceptive marketing, but I also noticed that some listings didn't mention the material at all. So in the end, it's just down to bad luck if you end up with a real or fake one. Starfish and sea urchins don't have brains or nervous systems, so it's hard to say if animal cruelty or ethical sourcing is a relevant issue here. However, animal welfare is absolutely an issue with the next product. Now we're moving on to the infamous furry keyrings. These are primarily sold as bag charms, but they're also popular for cosplay. I got so many comments about these under my tooth video because they're marketed as fake fur, but a lot of people suspect they might be real. One user even mentioned being able to feel a bone inside the center of one of these tails. So once again, I ordered from a whole bunch of different shops, and you can see that each one is clearly listed as fake fur. First things first, I don't think the usage of real fur would be scandalous from a purely functional perspective. However, I definitely feel it raises many questions about animal welfare and the ethical sourcing of animal products. This was a big issue under the tooth video because nobody knew where the teeth came from. The consensus is that it's impossible to get that many teeth from naturally deceased animals, so they were almost certainly byproducts from the fur trade. In this case, if the keyrings are real, then every buyer would inadvertently be supporting the fur industry and all the ethical issues that go along with it. My original plan was to X-ray these as well, but I can quickly feel that none of them actually have bones inside. So we can rule out real animal tails being used here. To be honest, my gut feeling is that all of these are fake because they look and feel so similar. This one in particular has a very stiff white fur that feels exactly like needle felting wool. But while playing around with this, I accidentally ripped a small piece off. This raises an immediate red flag because fake fur is attached to a mesh that shouldn't fall apart this easily. You can even see my head on camera because I was so surprised to see the bit that fell off. Then I started to pull apart the area by the seam and noticed that this definitely doesn't look like fake fur. It looks exactly like a sheep hide with the wool still attached. I pulled apart another keyring, and this one has a mottled grey texture which looks suspiciously like real skin. I ripped it open further and it looks like a very thin strip of fur that has been glued together. The third keyring I tried is quite similar, however the color is distinctively different. This appears a bit dirty and crusty, which really isn't very appealing. By this point, I'm convinced that all of the keyrings are real, but the next one comes with a surprise. When trying to pull it apart, I noticed a tiny hole at the base. This one is clearly made from a ring of fabric that's sewn together. So I used some scissors to cut it open, and it's quite obviously a fake. You can easily see the mesh that I was talking about earlier. Just like when you take apart a stuffed animal, the fur is attached to this type of fabric that lets you cut and sew patterns together. What's really interesting is that the fake fur tail has a much larger surface area compared to the real one. I'm guessing this must be due to the density of the hairs. I also realized that this allows you to determine if the keyring is real or fake just by touching it. A fake one feels like there's a wide piece of cardboard going all the way down the middle. For instance, when I'm stroking this one, this is the width of the hard material that I can feel. It's the same for this keyring, although due to the colors, I'm obviously not surprised this one is fake. But for some of the tails like these two, I'm really shocked at how similar they look. However, the inside surface area of a real fur tail is much smaller. So the trick for determining real fur is to check for something that feels like a bone. This must be exactly what the commenter on my previous video was talking about. This is obviously not a real bone, but a very thin piece of animal hide stuck to itself in a cone shape. Ironically, even though there isn't bone, if you feel something like a bone, then it's almost certainly real fur. This also makes sense because I feel they won't have enough tails for so many keyrings. But if each of these is made from a tiny scrap of fur that can come from anywhere in the body, then the margins are far more lucrative. These could simply be offcuts from clothing or accessories that were made with real fur. The unanswered question is what kind of animals the fur came from. I'm sure many viewers will have better knowledge about the fur industry, and I learned a lot from the comment section under the last video. I'm pretty sure this white one is sheep wool because it's one of the few animal hides I've seen myself. It also feels just like needle felting wool, which is typically made from sheep. I really don't know what this longish grey fur could be. Some people mentioned that foxes or raccoon dogs are often used in the fur trade. What shocked me quite a bit is how similar all of these look. There's no real way to tell them apart unless you know the trick about feeling the inside. Based on the ones I ordered, the real fur keyrings had this gold keychain, whereas the fake ones had silver. But one of the real ones also had a silver top, so it's impossible to say for sure. There was also no real difference in smell. I thought it would be quite easy to spot a leathery or musky scent from the real fur, but it was honestly very hard to pinpoint a difference. The only real method is by touching it, as I described earlier. The fake fur ones are much wider on the inside, and the real fur ones have a bone-like stem. But sadly, this is only possible after you buy the product, so the question is whether it's worth the risk of already giving money to companies involved in the fur trade. Whether or not the product is used afterwards is basically irrelevant. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive, and please feel free to leave more tips on weird Temu products below. I want to emphasize that this series is really about consumer choice and being aware of marketing and manufacturing processes. I'm not trying to make any sort of statement against online shopping platforms in general. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Yeah.